Welcome to another heavyweight episode of Trucks, and have we got a treat in store for you tonight? Brian turns his gaze to the Nissan Interstar, Tim will be road testing the MAN L2000, and we'll also be taking a look at your trucker's gripes.
Tonight's show brings us to Dunton, Ford's research centre. This is a 268-acre site which includes 40,000 square metres of workshops and test laboratories and more than 70,000 square metres of office space.
We launched Transit a couple of years back as a rear-wheel drive vehicle. We then brought out the front-wheel drive, lighter versions of it. And basically what we've been doing is filling in the gaps.
But first, if you thought the world of design was ruled by camp effeminate men with names like Jean-Paul Gaultier, you couldn't be further from the truth.
Here we are at Britain's biggest research and development centre to find out just what it takes to design a commercial vehicle. But we're not all about pens and paper here. It's all about mileage accumulation, accelerated fatigue, and of course the infamous climate control. But I think we're getting ahead of ourselves now. I think we should go back to the drawing board.
We go right through from 300 kilos on a KA van, right up to 4¼ tonnes on a jumbo Transit, and filling in every little space in between that we possibly can.
From here, the clay model is scanned into the computer and 3D coordinates are plotted, ready for the full-scale model to be chiselled out of styrofoam.
Called the 5-axis mill because it cuts in 5 directions, this tool is used for sculpting and shaving 3-dimensional full-size models. It can take up to 2 days to program the system with the cutting coordinates, and up to 4 to 6 weeks to completely cut the surface of the life-size model. And amazingly, this machine can cut to an accuracy of 0.1mm.
Information to the drive mill cab can be sent from any Ford design centre in the world, enabling designs generated in Dearborn or in Turin to be turned into full-scale models here at this location. We should note that the same technology is used to design both cars and commercial vehicles.
The market's become really seriously competitive. Now, I can't remember a year when I sort of got to the end of the year, went home on Christmas and said, well, that was an easy old year, thank goodness for that. They're all tough, but there are a lot of very serious competitors in there. And so for everybody operating in the commercial vehicle industry, we're all going to be fighting for every last sale, and that's going to put a lot of tension, a lot of pressure in the industry for the players in it. But for the customer, of course, that's very good news because they're going to get some super deals without doubt.
There's technology here that Starship Enterprise will be proud of, and we'll be back in Dunton later when we go onto the test track. But for now, it's over to Brian, who's been doing a little bit of stargazing.
Nissan's new 3500 weight Interstar. This is their new addition to the heavyweights. 3500 weight, 12 cubic metres of space in this. It's supposedly their new 90 DCI van. Let's go and have a look, shall we, to see what it goes like.
Outside styling of the van, it's a very pretty van. It looks nice, it's got good styling on the outside. Interior in the cab, everything's where you want it. It's got plenty of clips, plenty of places to put all your storage stuff. It does look nice as well. The only thing you've got to watch out for is that bonnet drops off at the front very sharp. Don't park too close to something or you can box yourself in. Otherwise, a very nice van. Nice bit of torque from that diesel engine there. Being a Nissan, the Japanese usually do turn out a good diesel engine, and it certainly is very, very torquey. The only thing I would comment on though is the gear shift. It's a cable gear shift to the gearbox, and it is a bit notchy. You've got to sort of make sure you place that gear lever right, or else it doesn't feel like it's actually gone into gear. It's a nice high driving position, you can see nice and clearly. The only thing that does obscure it, you've got this pillar here by the quarter light, and that, if you pulled that mirror back a fraction further to see a bit clearer, this pillar would actually be right in your viewpoint. Now the van's a 3500 weight. It's a standard roof, and it's quite a tall van, but it actually feels very stable. Good strong wind blowing today, and it certainly does feel stable, there's no doubt about it. Servicing intervals on a vehicle like this, again, you're going to be looking at 10,000. That will be normal procedure for a vehicle like this. To keep it in the warranty while you've got it under warranty period, you do have to take it to a main dealer. Make sure your book's stamped up. With this bulkheading we got fitted here, this steel bulkhead with a glass section in it, certainly makes it very quiet in the cab as well. There's no drumming noise from the back. It's very pleasing inside the cab. The trim layout is very good, the seats are very comfortable. You've got the single driver's seat, which has got a stack of adjustment on it, height, tilt, and the back, so the driver can certainly find a comfortable position to drive in. Dual passenger seat, both fitted with headrest, so passengers and driver do get a good comfortable ride.
Trouble is with these big panel doors is ill fitment. Now the hinges on these doors don't pull these in very well. Look at that. 2,000 miles this vehicle's done, that's all. State of that door. When this vehicle's done about 60,000, how much water is that going to let in there? Everything you've got in there is going to get ruined. Better catches on there would do a better job.
Right, the Nissan Interstar, what do we think of it so far? It's got an impressive payload actually of 12 cubic metres in the back. That's 1,630 kilograms of space. So, fair old bit of gear can be put in the back. Remember, 2.5 turbo diesel, that's going to pull well with 90 brake horsepower on it. So, there's a lot of power.
We've road tested this vehicle, we've looked over it. There are a lot of nice features on this vehicle, so if you were looking at buying a 3,500 weight van, would you think of something like this? These features on this vehicle for parking, reversing, getting in and out of tight spots, certainly worth thinking about. Would it be the vehicle for you though?
Now that's Japanese motoring at its best. But now it's time for Tim to do a little testing of his own as we take a look at what it takes for a commercial vehicle to graduate from here at Dunton.
And manufacturing a vehicle isn't just about producing a winning design. It's also about vehicle durability and also its total life cost.
And that means ensuring that the vehicle is put through the rigorous test that it endures during its working life.
And behind me is such an installation. Believe it or not, this is called the squeak and rattle rig.
This is a full-size simulator and it consists of a single and multi-axle shaker tables.
But technology like this doesn't come cheap, not like the women on this show. We're talking about something like $200 million US.
The shaker tables are used for testing systems such as seats and instrument panels and are housed in environmental and acoustic chambers where temperatures, humidity and sun load levels can be controlled and noise levels can be monitored. The interior of the vehicle is then assessed for squeaks and faults to the doors, instrument panel and dash. You know, the everyday wear and tear that a vehicle has to endure during its working life.
A similar process is used for the vehicle exterior. This is mounted on the 4 posts that you see behind me. This is called a road simulator. This is programmed for the different road conditions that the vehicle is expected to encounter.
50,000 road miles are simulated on this piece of kit in just 40 days. Now the Transit is tested in its unladen and laden states, and this is basically due to the fact that it encounters stress and fatigue during its lifetime and in its working condition. Now everything is analysed and recorded and measured via that computer there.
This process is used to diagnose and identify root causes of problems during the life cycle of a van, which are then referred to the component engineers for further refinement as part of the continuous test and design process. Is the earth moving for you, Helen? Because it certainly is for this Transit.
Climatic vehicle testing is undertaken in 2 environmental wind tunnels. One is called the Drivability Test Chamber and the other is the Hot Drive Simulator. Now both of these tunnels can reach speeds of up to 137 miles per hour.
Is that in first gear for you, Helen?
No, that's in reverse, Tim. But less about speed. What's key here is that we can test under temperatures of up to 60 degrees with the addition of solar radiation.
And this chamber can take up to 6 vehicles, controlling the relative humidity and also cold testing. It's a bit like being able to simulate a van driving from say, Finland to Arizona and seeing what effect the weather might have on that vehicle. Well, this certainly isn't the Arizona test bay.
Now this is the coal store start up and drive off area where they can simulate temperatures down to 20 degrees without even leaving the office. Now nowadays, with modern day technology, you can't go anywhere without hearing about emissions, and this is one of the places that they test for this.
You might remember in the last series we're in the Arctic with Renault. Well, this is Ford's equivalent in the Essex, and the main advantage I can see is the fact that there aren't any polar bears.
Well, there might not be any polar bears around here, but they're definitely not short on robots, and they're quite intelligent too. They can even drive.
Yeah, but I bet they can't do parallel parking at 3-point turns.
Oh, but they can change gear and work the pedals. Well, that's it for part one. Join us in part two when Tim will be testing the MAN L2000. We'll also be taking the Transit out on the test track, and of course we'll have truckers' gripes. Welcome back to Trucks. On tonight's show, we've been finding out just what goes into designing a commercial vehicle here at Britain's largest research and development site in Dunton. But before we carry on, Tim gets to grips with the might of the MAN L2000.
I don't know about you, but say MAN to me and I think about heavy trucks. I don't mean heavy as in heavy weight, but I mean about multi-wheelers and Arctics. I think also about solid, well-built, reliable engineering, but slightly uninspiring. That was, of course, until our friend the TGA came along. But with that comes its own set of problems. To me, it seems like MAN have been concentrating on the heavy end of the market. But what about the lighter end? What about its forgotten range? What about the lights? And more importantly, what about the L2000? The L2000 was launched over 10 years ago, with the cab being made by their in-house company Steyr in Austria. Over the years it has undergone a couple of facelifts, and it's recently been integrated into the Evolution range with the LE designation. Now, on first impressions, despite a couple of facelifts, the cabs still look a little bit dated. Don't forget, we've had completely new vehicles from DAF, from Renault and Mercedes since this was launched, and rumours abound that Iveco are going to bring out a new cargo. But that's the first impressions. More importantly, let's go and see how it stacks up against the competition. Well, first impressions are getting, I think, not bad, a bit functional. I mean, to me it's typically German. It is quite functional. It's not going to set a fashion, it's not a trendsetter. It does the job, and you can't argue with that. It does the job, but you know, you can tell it is a bit older. We've got switches are a bit different, you know, the old style sort of 10 years ago. So it is a bit, it's a bit old-fashioned really, more than anything else. First thing that I certainly noticed was the steering wheel. This steering wheel, to say it's big, is a bit of an understatement. It should be on this Titanic, I'll tell you. It's enormous. I know German vehicles have got this tendency to have large steering wheels, but this looks like it's been sort of like all the vehicles been downsized from a tractor unit, but they forgot to put the steering wheel downsized that. It's enormous. In front of me, I've got the controls. Left hand side, I've got a tachometer, on the right hand side, I've got the rev counter. Here, this vehicle's 140 brake horsepower. It revs something in the region of around about 2400 RPM for the maximum power, and torque-wise, it's about 560 newton meters. When we get to the economy side, obviously the rev counter's on the right hand side. I've got a green band here between 1500 RPM and 1800. Now that, to me, is quite tight. Okay, they have a grade out band between 1200 and 2100, but we're seeing with a lot of these Euro 3 engines, we're seeing quite a large band nowadays, around about 800 to 900. Here, it's quite tight, about 300 to 400 RPM. Dashboard layout, instrumentation, to me, has not changed. I mean, I've known MAN for the last, certainly the L2000, for the last sort of 10 years, and it hasn't changed. Certainly not to me, anyway. I've always thought when the L2000 was launched that it had a nice, good, deep windscreen. So again, that hasn't changed. So visibility-wise, pretty good indeed. The L in L2000 designates a light range and covers two vehicles, the LE150C and the LE180C. The vehicle we are testing today is a lower horsepower version at 140 brake horsepower with 540 Newton meters of torque. It's matched to the ZF 5-speed gearbox and has an unladen weight on the 4.6 metre wheelbase of just over 3,000 kilograms. Well, there is no doubt the L2000 is definitely showing its age. When it was first launched, it was a bit of a revolution, or should I say evolution, to use MAN's current advertising campaigns. But it's definitely been passed by a lot more of the competition. Having said that, it's quite reliable, it's solidly built, and I'm sure it will prove popular with a lot of its existing customer base.
Well, Tim, you certainly put that through its paces. But now it's time for that part of the show when we tackle the issues close to your heart in Truckers' Gripes. In the old days, heavy vehicles delivered their goods to big freight centres based on the city outskirts. Loads were then tipped and reloaded into smaller trucks and delivered to businesses in the city centre, which minimised urban traffic congestion. This practice was reduced when motorways were built and meant goods could be delivered quicker, more efficiently and at reduced transport costs to hauliers. With ever-increasing traffic congestion in city centres, the Department of Transport are now planning to cut the volume of heavy vehicles entering cities. But do you think the ban will work?
Stupid idea. You're just going to mean more traffic in the town centre with smaller vehicles.
Well, they need banning, but there again you've got electric trucks in to do deliveries and that, but I think you've got to try and sort of early in the morning or late at night, you know, you've got to try and keep them out. But
pedestrianised zones have already made truckers' jobs harder to deliver goods during 9 to 5 working hours, meaning late night time deliveries for many companies. How would the industry be affected if the government introduced entrance charges to city centres during the daytime for all vehicles?
I think the industry as such, the haulage industry as such, would be quite happy to pay a toll charge or whatever for using main routes and city centres.
Small firms will go out of business. One-man bands, they just won't be able to afford it. If they're going to a city centre 3 or 4 times in a week, it's just money they could do without spending.
If they ban it altogether, then they'll have to find sites where compounds and that where we take cars. But for the likes of guys who've got groceries and stuff like that, they've got to go in or else people ain't going to get the foods in the stores, are they? So it's the cars they want to start reducing. These aren't doing a job. Cars are money there to let them park and ride like a lot of cities have now, so.
Maybe the park and ride scheme will be compulsory and road tax will increase to improve city bypass systems. This would allow vehicles with a legitimate reason back into our cities without heavy congestion or causing disruption to other road users. But for now at least, the reality is city centres are going to have to cope with large trucks, late night deliveries and spiralling transport costs. As you probably already know, it's Ford Transit's 36th birthday this year, and early on in the series we went down to the Ford Transit factory in Southampton to take a look at the building of it from start to finish, but we never got a chance to test drive it, and today Tim does.
We found here that test drivers undergo special appraisal to make sure they can assess the things that we're looking for in this van. And here we're looking at things like making sure that the steering's correct, the ride, the handling, and also looking at maybe the sound and noise that we're going to get inside the cab. Also, you get in vans, one of the biggest problems we get is high-pitched boom and noise from the rear axle. Because it's quite a large, dense vehicle, you find that you actually get a lot of noise from the rear axles. So that's where drivers really come into it. Very difficult for robots to pick up that sort of noise. It's rather subjective rather than objective. The test centre we've got here at Dunton, the track itself is more like an appraisal track. It's not like your full test facilities that you might get in the UK for something similar like Myra or for Millbrook. But you've got 2 cambers here, a left-hand side, a right-hand side, and a couple of straights, which is sufficient to be able to test the vehicle to a certain level, but certainly wouldn't get you to be able to pass it, for instance its national type approval, things like that. This criteria is part of a formal test that the engineers have set. Some of these can be short as half an hour or as long as an hour and a half to 2 hours. The tests then are scored. If the vehicle passes the test that the engineers have agreed with, then that's fine. If it doesn't, they have to go back to the drawing board and start again. So, if I was appraising this vehicle, what would I think? Well, first of all, it does drive quite well and takes the corners reasonably well, but I do find it quite noisy. Now, I don't know if this is because of the function of the automatic gearbox that we've got here, but compared to the modern engines that we get nowadays, I find this a little bit noisier than I expected. Now, for instance, here, the hands-off speed, if you like, is about 47 miles an hour, or about 75 kilometres an hour. That means that what I can do, in theory, is actually take the vehicle through the bank to the top and take my hands off the wheel, and the vehicle will drive itself round the bank. That's what is common in a lot of the test tracks.
That's all we've got time for this week, but be sure to join us next week when Tim will be getting to grips with something rather big.
And Brian will be testing his Caddy, and no, I'm not talking about golf, I'm talking about the Volkswagen Caddy.
And we'll have more rumbles and grumbles in Truckers' Gripes. So until then, goodbye.